What is up, guys, and welcome to the third video discussion for my book, The Shopkeeper's Son. Again, link is in the description if you have not checked out the book yet. I would first like to talk about the contrast between Isra and Isbek. So Isbek would be Narl's half-brother, and Isra would be, well, she's not related to him, but she's the daughter of Narl's adoptive father, Uncle Athmir. And with these two characters, especially with them showing up relatively close to each other in the narrative, I wanted to basically show the worst of both worlds when it comes to Isbek on the traditional side and Isra being the vanguard of what Narl considers to be the new world. And Isra on the one hand has Isra and Uncle Athmir, I tried to portray them as having more modern values, so they're more meritocratic. They're all about doing away with the old order of things with bloodlines, while Isbek is about not just preserving the old ways, but restoring them, in his view at least. And as hinted at previously in the previous chapter, in one of the previous chapters where we saw Isbek, it's basically at times difficult to distinguish between these two, despite being supposedly at odds with one another ideologically. They really are just doing the same things or having the same effect on the world around them. They're both interested or bent on seizing the property or taking advantage of people they consider less worthy. So Isbek, from his perspective, he wants to restore the glory of his house, of the rightful glory of his house, as those who subscribe to Isra's school of thought are more interested in everyone getting, they're more interested in people being rewarded for their efforts. We also take a short stop in these chapters to visit Room, who is a blacksmith, or a man who owns a smithy, who has climbed the ranks in his own network. He's basically a member of it's not really called a guild, but it's sort of almost like a medieval guild, but for blacksmiths. And he also has made quite a fortune by lending weapons to people. And this is quite in line with the way many pre-modern societies were. The reason men entered into the service of lords, or lords had a lot of vassals in their employ in their households, is because weapons, horses, land were extremely expensive, out of reach of most people, and the only real way to get access to it for the majority of people would be to enter into the service of a lord who could afford those things. So that's how vassal relations pretty much evolved. And Narl, we at least get some hints at the fact that he's not very good at managing at least if he were good at managing his finances, he probably wouldn't need to be loaning his weapons, which he lost in the raid. That occurred before the events of this book, so that's a point of tension between him and Room. Room has loaned weapons and a horse to Narl, who proceeded to lose them in the last raid. And Room, of course, wants some return on his investment, while Narl also is trying to, after not receiving any help from Uncle Athmir to settle his debt, is trying to find a way to earn his own income, but he also does not want to be reduced to working a farm plot or picking up any quote-unquote honest work, as his Uncle Athmir would put it. So he's trying to finesse Room, or just trying to get an arrangement from him, promising him he'll pay him back. He'll definitely pay him back. Just let me borrow another horse from you. Of course, the Room is not going to do that, except at a very exorbitant rate, and he's still demanding that Narl at least compensate him for what he lost in the raid. And he warns Narl that by the advent of spring, if he hasn't turned up with the sums that Room is demanding, then he won't be able to secure these things from the guild ever again, because they'll all agree to charge exorbitant rates if he ever tries to get anything from them. What about the ruby, though, that Narl mentioned in the flashback? There's a bit of a flashback, but with him trying to convince the Yalom to come on a raid with him, when the Yalom is just starting out on following in Uncle Athmir's footsteps of being a merchant. And Narl, day after day, at least according to him in the flashback, shows up that this is not honorable work, and it's more honorable to embrace the ways of the fathers, as he would put it. And Mike had a specific question about, well, the quote-unquote Narl says, "I didn't kill anyone for this ruby. I maimed and scared and broke some things, which I don't know if that's meant to be taken literally. I try to write these things from the perspective as if this is a folk history or folk story that a scribe is writing or recounting. And I don't know if Noddle is being literal over here, or if he's being hyperbolic, or if he's downplaying his own deeds to try and make it convincing to Yalom. It could be all of those things, or some of those things all at the same time. A question from Sherman is there going to be any gunpowder in this story? I don't know if this is really spoiling anything really too bad, but no, this is not a technology or magic driven story. And although in earlier drafts of the story, I did have a bit of a subplot with mercenaries who introduce early firearms to the main character, which he then uses to win an encounter with his enemies. But I realized that's kind of silly. That's not how technological advances work. It's not a magic trick that you suddenly pull out on the battlefield. It's not a tech tree from a video game that you suddenly unlock. It's very iterative. These technologies are adopted by multiple factions and they're slowly iterated upon. So you're really not, it's not realistic for one faction, especially when these factions are known to each other. It's not like you have a bunch of explorers exploring a recently discovered continent with all these different civilizations. These are people these are interconnected civilizations, and I really think it'd be kind of cheesy if the good guys suddenly gain access to technology that ends up being decisive in battle later on. And overall, the action is very character focused. It's not based on weapon systems or magic systems. It's very character focused. It's very focused on the interactions between the characters and all the dynamics between them. And finally, didn't Noddle have any recourse to regain his house from Izbek? Well, and also Mike on this matter had a question about why not have Uncle Athmir? Why did Uncle Athmir not inherit the house? Well, first of all, Uncle Athmir is not a blood relation, and second of all, Izbek, despite being the son of a merchant, still has noble blood on the side of his mother. And being Noddle's half brother, he at least has a claim. It might be shaky, it might be not, but he at least, if anyone does have a claim on the property, it will be him, considering Noddle has no living parents and no living full brothers and no children of his own. So it would make the most sense that Izbek would be, or Izbek or Gozal would be the ones to inherit it. And in terms of legality, well, these aren't the Glartholians. They don't have a very they don't have a very heavily codified and rigid set of laws governing these things. It's a semi-nomadic society where things are done because that's how they've always been done. That's kind of the rationale between all these laws. Laws are based on precedent, are based on on a commonly known precedent, and that's how these there's a strong personal element to these laws. And we'll also get some more insight into why the chief approved giving Noddle's home over to Izbek. There's another motivation. The offensiveness of Noddle striking Isra. It's very clear if you actually follow the text that it has nothing to do. Noddle never insults her or confronts her over the fact that she's a woman. It has nothing to do with that based on the text. It's all to do with the fact that she somewhat unwisely decides to tarnish the image of Yalom, and in Arabian culture and then maybe in some other Eastern cultures, it's considered quite improper overall. I mean, not just improper, very rude. It's generally a big no-no to try and to speak negatively of the dead, regardless of the sentiments towards them as they were living. But it's generally considered a big, it's generally considered something you just don't do or say when it comes to the dead. And Noddle being close friends with Yalom, they were basically they were more or less brothers, and they'd been through a lot together. I can definitely see him making the very unwise decision to strike her, and that's really the only way I could make him reach rock bottom. That's really the only reasonable way he could have been kicked out of Uncle Athmir's house. I don't think a heated argument would have been enough, considering he just got out of prison, and he would probably have some goodwill, at least based on the fact that he'd been through a lot. At least it's only been a few days. And Noddle's loss of control in this regard. It pretty much lines up with his character so far as brashness. I mean, if we remember anything about the bridge encounter, the bridge encounter and the field burning, he doesn't take kindly to people insulting his friends or family. So there's that as well. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys, and I hope you're enjoying reading this story. And if you have not, you should get to reading it quite soon. And I will see you all next time. Bye bye.